The mafia boss stormed into the hospital in rage. But the moment he opened that door, his entire world stopped. His ex, the woman he abandoned, was standing there, holding a newborn with his blue eyes. And before he could breathe, masked men burst in, not to kill him, but to take the child. Now he must uncover the truth. Who set him up? Who framed her? And why does the entire underworld want the baby he never knew existed? Adrian Knight entered the hospital with the force of a storm that refused to be contained. His presence cracked through the sterile silence, like thunder, drawn not by fear, but by a command that rippled through every corridor he passed. Security stiffened, stepping aside without being asked. Nurses halted mid-stride, whispering, recognizing the danger in his expression, before they remembered the uniformity of their job. The air changed with him, cold, sharp, electric, like the city's underworld had dragged itself into the fluorescent-lit hallways. He wasn't supposed to be here. Hospitals were places for the fragile, the desperate, the dying. He was none of those things. The call came 15 minutes earlier. "Medical emergency," the voice said, but the caller refused to give details. No explanation, no context, just a request he didn't usually grant. "Come alone." He almost hung up until the voice broke and said the name, Lena Hale. His breath had lodged in his throat. Lena, a name he had sworn he buried 5 months ago when he walked away from the only thing in his life that ever felt real. A name that once softened him, steadied him, held him together, before tearing every corner of him apart. He told himself she wasn't his problem anymore, that the past should stay where he forced it. But the moment he heard her name, something in him shifted sharp and uncontrollable. Now he was here, and the hospital felt too small to contain the storm inside him. He moved down the hallway with a speed that startled even him, his footsteps too heavy, too angry, too afraid. He didn't know what he was walking into, and that alone made his pulse hammer against his ribs. He didn't fear bullets or betrayal. But this unknown tied to her name, unsettled him in a way gunfire never could. Room 407, a door like any other, and yet his chest tightened, like it was the edge of a battlefield. He reached for the handle, hesitated for a fraction of a second, something he never did, and pushed the door open. The world stilled. Lena stood inside, not fragile as he imagined, but iron-willed and unbroken. She wore exhaustion, like armor instead of defeat. Her shoulders were steady, her posture upright, her gaze impossibly calm. And in her arms, she held a newborn, wrapped securely, gently, almost fiercely, as if she had fought the world to bring this child into it and had no intention of letting it go easily. She didn't gasp at the sight of him, didn't stumble, didn't avert her eyes or drop her gaze the way she used to when she still loved him with innocence. She looked at him as if he were someone she had already grieved. Her voice broke the silence, soft but unshakably firm. "Adrian," she said, "don't step closer. Not tonight." It wasn't fear in her tone. It was boundary, distance, a line she wouldn't let him cross. Not anymore. His throat tightened without warning. He didn't step closer, but he didn't step back either. He simply stared, unable to reconcile the sight in front of him with the version of her burned into his memory. The girl he left had been warm, hopeful, too forgiving. The woman before him was carved by fire, stronger, richer, more composed than he had any right to witness. He didn't know what to say. His vocabulary evaporated, leaving only the hollow echo of regret he never admitted to anyone, least of all himself. He searched her face for anger, for bitterness, for anything that matched the weight in his chest. But all he found was a kind of finished sadness. Not dramatic, not desperate, just done, exactly as she warned. But then, her arm shifted, adjusting the newborn. Only now did Adrian truly look at the child. Small, quiet, wrapped in pale fabric, face soft with sleep. And then the baby opened its eyes. Not brown, not green, not hazel. Blue. His blue. A color that ran through generations of nights. A color no coincidence could explain. A color that shattered every wall he fortified around his heart. His breath caught. His world tilted. And for the first time in years, the untouchable Adrian Knight felt something dangerously close to fear. Before he could speak, Lena looked at him with a quiet, steady devastation and whispered, "Now you understand what you walked away from." Adrian's breath faltered, a shudder he couldn't disguise even behind the armor he'd worn for years. The man who never flinched under bullets, never hesitated while facing rivals, never allowed emotion to dictate a single calculated move, now stood frozen, hollowed out from the inside. Something old and deeply buried cracked under the weight of this moment, splintering like glass under pressure he could no longer withstand. The air felt heavier, as if every regret he tried to choke out of his memory had suddenly crawled back and wrapped both hands around his throat. Lena shifted, a subtle movement, but deliberate, turning her body just enough to shield the newborn from him. She held the child like he was precious, irreplaceable, fragile, yet fiercely protected. Her instinctual recoil hit him like a blow. It wasn't physical distance. It was emotional exile. She wasn't afraid of him. She was done trusting him. That realization landed sharper than any knife he'd ever dodged. "You don't get to claim shock," she whispered. Her voice, low but unwavering, her gaze refusing to soften. "You forfeited that right when you walked out without a word." The steadiness of her tone carved deeper wounds than accusation ever could. No shouting, no tears, just truth delivered so calmly it left him unbalanced. His chest tightened with a pressure he couldn't alleviate. She was right. He had walked away. He'd done it swiftly, brutally, and without explanation, because he thought he had one, because he believed he was saving himself from humiliation, from betrayal, from a lie he didn't know was carefully crafted. And suddenly, memories he spent months forcing into shadows surged forward with ruthless clarity. The night he left her. The envelope waiting on his table. The photos, grainy but convincing, of her entering a hotel room. The text messages from an unknown number, hinting at secret meetings. The recorded voice message, distorted yet damning. Evidence presented like a knife, held steady at his pulse. He remembered the rage, the humiliation, the way every insecurity he'd ever buried clawed its way up and convinced him that she, the only light in his darkness, had betrayed him for someone else. He hadn't confronted her. He hadn't asked. He had believed the lies, because believing them meant he didn't have to confront the growing fear that he was never enough for something as pure as her. But now, seeing her holding that child, seeing the controlled strength in her eyes, it hit him with a violent certainty. It was all lies, all of it. A setup, a manipulation, a trap he stepped into willingly. The truth he never saw coming slammed into him with enough force to buckle his certainty. Someone wanted him to walk away from her. Someone wanted to break them. Someone had succeeded. For the first time in months, he tried to speak, tried to form a sentence that didn't sound like an excuse or a plea, but nothing came out. His throat tightened, raw and useless. The apology forming in his mind felt microscopic compared to the devastation he had caused. Lena's expression didn't soften. If anything, it grew colder, more resolved. She had rebuilt herself without him. She had grown stronger in the spaces he abandoned. She had endured what he couldn't imagine, and she had done it alone. Before he could gather the courage to speak, a loud crash echoed through the hallway, snapping both of them back into the present. Heavy footsteps thundered toward the door, each one striking the floor with urgent purpose. Nurses shouted somewhere behind them. A metal tray clattered to the ground. The air changed. Sharper, hostile, familiar in a way that twisted Adrian's instincts into full alert. His eyes narrowed, senses sharpening like steel drawn from a sheath. This was no ordinary hospital disturbance. This was the kind of chaos that stalked him everywhere he went. The kind he thought he'd left outside, away from Lena, away from anything that resembled a life untouched by violence. But danger had found them anyway. He stepped forward by reflex, but Lena's arm tightened around the baby, her body tensing. She looked at him, not with fear, but with a silent question, a warning, a reminder that she didn't trust him to protect her anymore. Before he could answer that unspoken doubt, before he could move, speak, or breathe, the door slammed open. A masked man burst into the room, a cold metallic weapon raised, not at Adrian, but pointed directly at Lena and the child. Instinct ignited like fire through Adrian Knight's veins before his mind could even register the threat. His muscles coiled, his body moving with a precision honed from years of survival in Chicago's underworld. Without hesitation, he lunged forward, pressing Lena behind him, as though his body alone could shield them from the storm about to erupt. Every step, every motion was sharp, controlled, lethal. The masked intruder moved with practiced aggression, a weapon glinting coldly in hand. The first shot cracked through the air. Glass shattered violently, splinters flying like jagged stars. The alarms screamed, piercing the tension with a mechanical shriek that rattled nerves already taut with danger. Every sound was magnified, every shadow a potential assassin. Lena's grip tightened instinctively around the baby. Her eyes widened, not with the panic Adrian expected, but with recognition. Recognition of a predator, of someone who knew exactly where to find her, exactly when to strike. She whispered, her voice trembling only slightly. "They found me, already." Adrian froze for a fraction, a brief hesitation that carried the weight of every mistake he had ever made. His gaze locked on her face, searching for clarity, understanding, betrayal, anything he could use to anchor his next move. "Found you?" he demanded, voice sharp, low, vibrating with a controlled fury. "What do you mean? Who's after you?" She did not answer. She merely held the child closer, rocking him subtly, as though her calm could shield him from the chaos unfolding. Her face was pale beneath the fluorescent lights, the tension etched in every line. There was exhaustion there, raw and undeniable, mingled with something darker, haunting memories she had carried alone. Like armor, her lips pressed into a thin line, eyes darting toward every corridor, every shadow, measuring the threat with a precision that made Adrian's pulse spike. He took a step toward her, ready to confront, to demand, to protect. The intruder fired again, a deafening crack that ricocheted against the sterile walls. Adrian swore under his breath as glass sprayed across the floor, shards cutting into tiles and walls. The room vibrated with a sudden, violent energy. Alarms mingled with the echo of boots against the floor, the sounds layering into a perfect storm of danger. He pressed Lena down, their bodies a shield, his arms encircling both of them. She did not resist. Her body fit against his in the instinctive trust that had always existed before betrayal and abandonment. His head snapped toward the intruder, calculating, analyzing, every instinct screaming for a solution, a path to safety. He could not falter. Not now. Not when every second could cost them their lives. "They know where I am because of me," Lena whispered again, voice barely audible over the chaos. Her words struck him differently this time. Not anger, not frustration, regret, pain. Adrian's chest tightened. He couldn't process her choice to protect him with words that implied he was powerless. He wasn't powerless. He had never been powerless. But he realized now that this wasn't a fight he could win alone. Not with the stakes this high. The masked intruder advanced, the gun raised, steady and merciless. Adrian tensed every muscle, ready to counter, to strike, to end this before it escalated further. He had learned in countless fights that hesitation meant death. But hesitation didn't belong to him. Not here, not now, not with Lena and the child depending on him. Without a word, he grabbed Lena's wrist, pulling her toward the stairwell with sudden, brutal urgency. Every second counted. Every moment of delay could be their last. They barreled through the swinging doors, alarms chasing them, glass crunching beneath their feet. Adrenaline coursed like wildfire, his senses sharpening with unnatural clarity. He could feel every step, hear every footfall, see every shadow, every corner, every movement around them with perfect precision. The stairwell greeted them with a harsh, metallic echo. He pressed Lena and the child against his chest, moving downward with controlled speed, calculating distance, angles, and cover. The world narrowed to this: Lena, the child, and the path to safety. Nothing else existed. Every thought that had plagued him, every memory of betrayal, abandonment, regret, vanished into singular purpose: protect. Each siren they passed through felt like a countdown, marking time against an unknown adversary whose reach had extended farther than Adrian had anticipated. His mind raced, scanning possibilities, escape routes, and the potential for ambush. Every instinct screamed danger. Every sense demanded vigilance. He could feel her heartbeat against his chest, steady but tense. He could feel the child's tiny weight, delicate but unyielding. He could feel his own pulse, a violent drum that threatened to betray his composure. They descended rapidly, the stairwell twisting and narrowing, forcing movement in a single, strategic line. Adrian moved first, scanning ahead. Lena followed instinctively, keeping the child safe between them, a silent partner in survival. Her movements were careful, precise, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed the constant calculations running through her mind. She had survived alone. She had endured threats and traps before. And yet here, beside him, she relied on his strength, not because she trusted him fully, but because she recognized the difference his presence made. The intruder's footsteps echoed above them, deliberate, methodical. Adrian's mind calculated trajectories, exits, and potential cover. He shifted his weight, keeping Lena between him and the threat. His every action was choreographed for survival, a deadly dance refined by years of navigating treachery and betrayal. Yet this was different. This wasn't a rival with predictable motives. This was someone who had tracked Lena, whose purpose was unknown but deadly clear: harm or abduction. Somewhere above them, another shot rang out. The bullet ricocheted against the concrete, sending sparks flying. Adrian's stomach clenched. Every instinct screamed to move faster, to anticipate the attack, to protect what was precious. He pressed Lena's back to his chest, adjusting the child's position so the tiny body would not bear the brunt of any miscalculation. Even in chaos, he remained calculated. That was who he was. That was the difference between surviving and dying. "They're not just after you," Lena muttered under her breath, eyes narrowing. Her voice was nearly lost amidst the chaos, but Adrian caught every word. "It's me they want, or you." The implication was clear. Whoever orchestrated this attack had a plan, and Adrian hated that he was just discovering the depth of it now. They reached a landing, the stairwell splitting into two narrow corridors. Adrian made a quick judgment, taking the path that offered minimal exposure. Lena followed, silent but resolute. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of the world, something Adrian had forgotten in his single-minded pursuit of power and revenge. The baby stirred, sensing tension, and Lena adjusted instinctively. A soft, protective murmur escaped her lips, instinctual and commanding. Finally, the emergency exit loomed ahead, a heavy metal door that could provide cover, concealment, and temporary respite. Adrian's hand froze on the handle, a fraction of hesitation, not for fear, but for calculation. One wrong move could draw attention. One wrong decision could cost them everything. He glanced at Lena. Her eyes met his, unreadable but sharp, reflecting both exhaustion and determination. In that moment, Adrian understood. She had survived by being relentless, by being calculated, by being fearless in ways he had underestimated. He pulled the door open with controlled force. Outside, chaos had not ceased. Ambulances, flashing lights, and the sound of tires on wet pavement filled the space. The rain-slicked streets reflected neon from nearby signage, casting fractured light across the pavement like shards of broken glass. Every shadow could conceal an enemy. Every parked car could hide a weapon. Every reflection could mask betrayal. Adrian guided Lena toward the relative safety of a recessed corner, pressing his body against hers as they moved. The child was still tucked safely between them, and for a moment, the only sound was the rapid pounding of their combined heartbeats, mingling with distant sirens and the echo of gunfire inside the hospital. Adrian's mind worked in overdrive, calculating escape, anticipating pursuit, and preparing for confrontation. But something caught his attention, a sound foreign to the chaos, the roar of an engine. A vehicle screeched into view, tires screaming against wet asphalt. Lights cut through the night, blinding in their intensity, yet precise in focus. A black SUV skidded violently to a stop, its door remaining suspiciously closed. The engine idled, low and menacing, as if waiting, and then, slow as a predator savoring its prey, the back window slid down. The reflection in the glass revealed movement inside. A silhouette, familiar, unknown, dangerous beyond comprehension. Adrian's pulse surged. For the first time in hours, he felt truly cornered. He didn't know who or what awaited them, only that it was close, immediate, and lethal. Lena's grip on the child tightened, instinctively sensing the same threat. Adrian pressed back against her subtly, ready to strike, ready to defend, ready to kill if necessary. But even in his heightened state, he could not read the figure in the vehicle. Only that danger had not only followed them, it was now here. The sirens continued to blare. The rain fell harder, slicking the pavement. Adrian's mind raced, weighing every possible outcome, every potential escape, every threat that could emerge in the next second. He knew this was no ordinary attack. Whoever was inside that SUV was patient, prepared, and relentless. Whoever it was had resources. They had intelligence, and they had one goal. And in that instant, Adrian understood. This was no random strike. This was orchestrated, calculated, personal. The black SUV's rear door slowly opened, revealing a figure stepping out, and the shadow cast in the rain looked almost impossibly familiar. Adrian's grip on Lena tightened, and for the first time, he realized that the fight he thought was about survival might actually be the beginning of uncovering a truth that would shatter everything he believed about loyalty, betrayal, and the past he tried to bury. The black SUV exhaled, a low, mechanical growl, as the rain-slicked streets reflected its threatening silhouette. Its engine purred like a predator ready to strike. Adrian's grip on Lena tightened instinctively. Every instinct screamed danger. Every cell in his body screamed awareness. He had faced death in alleyways, gunfights, and backroom deals, but nothing had ever sent a chill as deep as what awaited in that car. The rear door opened with slow precision, revealing a figure seated with an almost ceremonial calm. Marcus Varlow, Adrian's former mentor, the syndicate's silent puppeteer, the man whose decisions had once ruled empires without anyone ever noticing the strings being pulled. A man no one crossed and lived to tell the story. He leaned back, body relaxed, eyes sharp and calculating. There was power in his stillness and menace in the smile that crept across his face. A slow, venomous curl that promised consequences. Adrian's jaw clenched. Marcus had been absent for years, his shadow lingering only in whispers of the syndicate's will. But here he was, orchestrating chaos, and the thought that Marcus had come personally brought a sense of dread Adrian could not disguise. He stepped forward, his pace measured, his voice calm but lethal. "You're not touching them." Marcus tilted his head, the smile widening imperceptibly. His eyes flicked to Lena, not with curiosity, not with casual inspection, but with recognition. A slow chuckle, dry and dangerous, escaped him. "So she's the girl," he murmured, voice smooth as silk, yet edged with steel. "The one you threw away everything for." Lena stiffened immediately, protective instincts snapping. She shifted the baby closer, eyes narrowing, muscles taut. She had survived the world without Adrian before, and she could survive him watching now. But the tension in her posture betrayed the fear that came from knowing the stakes Adrian faced. Marcus was no ordinary threat. He was a force that could destroy them both without effort. Adrian felt a cold truth settle over him, like a frost creeping up his spine. Marcus's involvement in this attack was not peripheral. It had been calculated, meticulous, intimate. Every move that had led them to this moment bore the unmistakable mark of his former mentor's hand. He had underestimated Marcus, and that error could cost lives tonight. Marcus leaned forward, resting one hand casually on the leather armrest, the other tapping rhythmically on his thigh. "Adrian, you owe me a debt," he said, every word deliberate, each syllable slicing the air. "I've come to collect." Adrian's body tensed, coiled like a predator preparing to strike. The baby stirred slightly, sensing the gravity in the air, and Lena adjusted her hold, murmuring softly in a protective rhythm. Adrian's eyes never left Marcus's. He knew the man had played him before, taught him lessons in loyalty, power, and ruthless efficiency. But this was personal. Marcus's gaze lingered on Adrian, measuring, calculating. "You've grown bolder," he continued, voice low and venomous. "Too bold for your own good. And yet, here you are, dragging what's yours into a world you can't control." Lena's eyes flicked between Adrian and Marcus, unspoken questions burning in their depths. She had learned to read danger long before Adrian returned, learned to anticipate betrayal, learned to survive in a world built on deceit and blood. She understood the weight of what Marcus represented, the syndicate's silent wrath incarnate. Adrian's voice was hard, cutting through the tension like a sharpened blade. If you lay a finger on them, you'll regret it, and I'll make sure that regret lasts longer than your entire life. Marcus laughed softly, a sound devoid of warmth, filled with authority and menace. You always thought yourself untouchable, Adrian. But untouchable is a luxury you lost the moment you walked away from the game without paying your dues. The words sank deep. Every syllable carried weight, history, and unspoken consequences. Adrian knew Marcus wasn't bluffing. This was a man who collected debts the world didn't even know existed. Debts that could destroy families, empires, and men in the blink of an eye. Adrian shifted slightly, blocking Marcus's line of sight with his body, while keeping Lena and the baby protected. Every muscle in his frame screamed readiness. Every nerve fired with controlled energy. He had survived countless assassins, rivals, and betrayals, but Marcus's presence carried a different gravity. It wasn't just about survival. It was about the truth, the past, and debts that never expired. Marcus's fingers tapped again, slower this time, each tap a calculated punctuation of unspoken threats. You left her, he said, voice calm but cutting. And you think abandoning a mistake wipes the slate clean? You think throwing away a woman and a child absolves you from the consequences? Lena flinched, silent but alert. Adrian's hand tightened instinctively around her arm. The child stirred again, sensing the tension, as if understanding the danger before it fully revealed itself. Adrian's eyes darkened, the storm inside him intensifying. Marcus had underestimated one truth. Loyalty didn't die in Adrian Knight. It transformed, and Adrian's loyalty to Lena, to the child, had only grown sharper, colder, and more dangerous. Marcus finally leaned back, the smile fading into a calm, calculating expression. He reached slowly for a folder resting on the seat next to him. The movement was deliberate, theatrical, designed to draw attention and fear. Let's not waste time with empty threats, he said. The debt must be recognized. Adrian's pulse hammered, every muscle tensed. He didn't trust Marcus, never had, and every instinct screamed that what was inside that folder could destroy everything he thought he knew. He braced, the world narrowing into Marcus's movements, Lena's safety, and the unpredictable violence that could erupt in a single heartbeat. Marcus lifted the folder with measured precision, holding it as though it were a trophy. The rain streaked down the SUV window behind him, reflecting fractured light across his face, accentuating the lines of age, power, and cruelty. Adrian's eyes locked on it, every second stretched taut, every moment pregnant with unspoken consequence. Slowly, Marcus opened the folder, revealing its contents with a deliberate slowness meant to wound. Adrian's breath caught as he glimpsed the top page. A birth certificate lay inside, pristine yet damning, every detail precise and unflinching. But one mark stopped him cold. Adrian's name had been blacked out, scratched away with finality, as if history itself refused to recognize him. Lena's hand went stiff around the child, her knuckles white. She had known the fight was dangerous, but this was a revelation she hadn't anticipated. The depth of Marcus's manipulation was far greater than she had imagined. Adrian's chest tightened. Rage, guilt, and dread intertwined, creating a storm that threatened to consume him whole. For the first time, he understood the full scope of what he was up against. Marcus wasn't just here to collect a debt. He was rewriting history, deciding who lived, who survived, and whose identity mattered. Adrian's worst fears crystallized into a single, icy truth. Someone had taken his bloodline, his legacy, and deliberately erased him from it. Marcus's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, a predator savoring the fear in its prey. Everything you thought you knew, everything you abandoned, it's all subject to my terms, Adrian. His voice was low, final, and venomous. Adrian's jaw tightened, every fiber of his being screaming for retaliation, for answers, for protection of what remained precious to him. Lena's eyes met his, steady, unyielding, burning with the same intensity. The child slept peacefully, oblivious, but everything Adrian had ever fought for was in that small bundle. He realized, coldly, that the real battle wasn't just for survival. It was for identity, for the truth, for the past he thought was gone, and for the future he might never see if he faltered. Marcus leaned closer, a sinister smile forming once more. He tapped the folder and whispered with lethal calm, "The truth is far darker than you imagine, Adrian, and it starts with what you never knew about your own child." The black SUV shuddered under the weight of secrets, the rain streaking across its polished surface like a warning written in liquid silver. Inside, the world seemed to constrict, every movement heavy with unspoken threats. Adrian's eyes never left Marcus Varlow, the man whose calm presence carried the power of a storm restrained. Marcus tapped the folder with slow, deliberate precision, the sound hollow but commanding, like a drumbeat marking the beginning of a war. "You think the world doesn't know?" Marcus asked, his voice low, venomous, almost indulgent in its cruelty. "The last night air is valuable, dangerous, and claimable." Adrian's chest tightened. The words weren't just statements. They were verdicts, a challenge, a threat folded neatly into truth. His mind raced, connecting pieces he had only glimpsed before. The attacks, the blacked-out name, the manipulated documents. Someone had rewritten the rules of inheritance, rewritten destiny, and now Adrian had to confront a reality he had never anticipated. Lena's grip on her child tightened instinctively, her small fingers pressing into the soft fabric of his swaddling. She felt the weight of Adrian's gaze behind her, protective, relentless, unyielding. She understood, as he did, that Marcus's words were not idle. Every syllable carried consequence. Every pause between words held the potential for catastrophe. Adrian's pulse spiked, adrenaline mixing with rage. The baby in Lena's arms, a living testament of the bloodline, represented everything he had lost and everything he might lose again. The documents had been altered, deliberately, maliciously, by someone with reach and resources far beyond ordinary comprehension, someone who wanted the child unclaimed, or worse, claimed by the wrong side. "Who did this?" Adrian demanded, his voice low but feral, teeth clenched, eyes burning with a fire that had been dormant too long. Marcus leaned back, letting a slow, mocking chuckle escape. "You wouldn't believe me," he said, almost savoring the tension, almost enjoying the helplessness threading through Adrian's control. His words were a knife, twisting expectation and fear together. Suspense coiled in the small, cramped space, tangling around them like smoke. Adrian's heartbeat thundered, each second stretching impossibly long. He studied Marcus, trying to pierce the veil of menace, to find a clue, a fragment of honesty. But the man was a labyrinth. Every glance, every subtle movement, every calculated inflection was designed to keep him off balance. Lena shifted, her instincts razor sharp. She felt the same energy, the pressure, the imminent danger, the scent of calculated death lingering in the SUV's interior. The child shifted in her arms, sensing the weight of the moment even without understanding it. She murmured softly, a protective tone Adrian could feel more than hear. Then, without warning, the quiet tension shattered. A sharp, metallic ping echoed through the air. Bullets rained on the SUV, spraying the vehicle's exterior with lethal precision. The world erupted in chaos, glass shattering in a sparkling cascade, metal groaning under assault. Adrian reacted instantly, shoving Lena behind the nearest structural pillar, his body a living shield. The vehicle rocked violently under Marcus's hands as he ducked instinctively, eyes narrowing at the source. A sniper, perched on a nearby rooftop, had chosen his target with surgical intent. Rain mingled with gunpowder scent as the first few rounds zinged past, each one a reminder of the deadly reality outside. Adrian's heartbeat thrummed in his ears, adrenaline feeding into every movement, every calculation. Lena pressed herself low, holding the child as close as humanly possible. Fear threatened to rise, but she forced it down, focusing on breathing, on movement, on survival. She had survived alone before, and while Adrian's presence offered strength, it didn't remove the danger. The threat was still there, lethal, immediate, inescapable. Adrian peeked over the pillar, eyes scanning the rooftop across the street. He traced the glint of metal, the silhouette of the sniper crouched in calculated stillness. Every muscle in his body was taut, ready to spring, to strike, to counter. He had faced killers before, assassins trained to perfection. But this was different. The sniper was patient, cold, precise, and Adrian had little room for error. Marcus, unfazed by the attack, leaned back slightly, a faint smirk playing across his lips. "Predictable," he murmured. "I almost admire their diligence. Almost." His calmness infuriated Adrian, igniting a deeper, hotter fury. This man didn't just manipulate fate. He toyed with lives like pieces on a chessboard. And now, with the child and Lena in the line of fire, the stakes had escalated exponentially. Adrian's mind raced. Escape routes, sniper positions, structural cover, timing. Every variable had to be considered. He shifted slightly, keeping Lena low and the baby protected while scanning for angles. Each heartbeat was a countdown. Each second carried the potential for catastrophe. The SUV shuddered again under the rain and gunfire. The metallic scent of wet asphalt mixed with ozone from discharged rounds, sharp and suffocating. Adrian's senses expanded. He could feel the vibration of the bullets, hear the near-invisible whistle as they passed, track the sniper's movements like a predator reading prey. Lena whispered, almost to herself, "They won't stop. They can't." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. Adrian's heart ached with guilt. Every decision he made put her and the child at risk. Every moment he had spent walking away had led to this, a carefully orchestrated threat aimed at destroying everything he had ever loved. The sniper's presence was undeniable, but Adrian also sensed a second threat, a presence unnoticed at first. A second sniper, emerging from shadows previously ignored. A deliberate and calculated escalation. The realization hit him like ice. This wasn't a random strike. This was orchestration. Methodical, precise, deadly. The baby stirred again, sensing the tension, the lethal intent in the air. Adrian pressed Lena closer, shielding the child with his body, his jaw locked, his mind a flurry of calculations. Survival wasn't enough anymore. They had to escape. They had to survive. They had to strike back. Rain poured harder, blurring vision, masking movements, amplifying sound. Each raindrop was a drumbeat, syncing with the rapid, violent rhythm of Adrian's pulse. Every sense screamed danger. Every instinct demanded action. Bullets struck closer now, pinging off metal, scattering debris. Adrian pivoted, pushing Lena toward temporary cover while returning fire instinctively, calculated, precise. His mind split between offense and defense, strategy and instinct. Marcus remained calm, a deadly anchor in the chaos, observing. His smirk suggested he knew more than he revealed, that the real danger was not outside, but tied to secrets buried deeper than bullets or snipers. Adrian understood. The paper, the documents, Marcus's manipulation. It was all part of a larger game, a game with rules designed to crush him emotionally before physically. Time stretched, elastic and torturous. Adrian's mind raced with contingencies. Escape, counterattack, extraction. Every fraction of a second carried weight. Lena's gaze never left his. Her trust, implicit. Her fear hidden beneath layers of resilience. The child slept, unaware of the storm raging around them. A fragile emblem of innocence Adrian would fight to protect at all costs. Then, a movement on the rooftop, a glint of metal, a calculated shift. The second sniper's position revealed itself, aimed directly at Lena, trained on her, ready to fire. Adrian's breath caught. Every muscle tensed. He understood in that instant. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the life in his arms, the woman he had loved and lost, could be gone in a heartbeat. Time slowed. The world narrowed. Rain, gunfire, adrenaline, all faded into a single point of focus. The second sniper's weapon raised, the barrel aligned with Lena's vulnerable form. Adrian's instincts screamed. Every lesson, every fight, every betrayal had led to this. Before he could act, the sniper fired. The bullet cut through the air, but something hit it first, deflecting it with a sharp, metallic clang. Adrian's head snapped toward the source, and a shadowy figure dropped from the adjacent rooftop, landing between them and the sniper. Adrian's eyes widened. This was no ordinary savior, and the revelation of who or what had arrived would change everything. The city screamed around them. An orchestra of chaos played in neon and rain. Adrian's hand gripped Lena's arm with a precision born from years of instinct, pulling her into a narrow alley as glass rained from above, shards scattering across wet pavement like lethal confetti. Every step was measured, calculated, but the rhythm of their escape was jagged, unpredictable, dictated by the danger that clawed at their heels. Chicago's neon signs flickered violently, casting fractured colors across their path. Red, blue, green, each hue painting the wet asphalt in uneven strokes that seemed almost surreal in their intensity. Rain poured steadily, soaking them in seconds, running cold over Adrian's skin, running warmer with the pulse of fear and adrenaline. The reflections of the city shimmered off puddles like broken mirrors, every step a distorted glimpse of the chaos surrounding them. Lena's breathing was sharp but controlled, a rhythm in sync with the baby pressed tightly to her chest. Her eyes, sharp and alert, scanned every corner, every shadow. She moved with an elegance and precision that spoke of someone who had survived more than most could imagine. Adrian's eyes caught hers for a split second, and in that moment, he saw it, her transformation. She wasn't a maid anymore. She wasn't the girl who once laughed with innocence in his presence. She had learned to survive, to fight, to protect what was hers without needing him. And yet, in that survival, she had a vulnerability he recognized instantly. The weight of the past, the scars hidden beneath every controlled movement. "What have you gotten into, Lena?" Adrian asked, voice low, dangerous, almost drowned beneath the storm of rain and neon light. There was urgency in his tone, but also a vulnerability he rarely allowed to surface. He needed answers. He needed truth. He needed to understand what had been orchestrated while he was away, what had grown in the shadows he couldn't see. She stopped, planting her feet firmly on the slick pavement, turning to face him fully. Her eyes locked onto his, unwavering. The baby stirred, sensing the intensity, but she did not falter. "Something I never wanted," she said, voice steady, a quiet weapon of revelation. "Something I didn't choose, and something you unknowingly pushed me into." Adrian's stomach nodded with the weight of realization. Guilt, fury, and helplessness collided inside him. He had walked away, thinking himself justified, thinking himself clever. He had believed he was avoiding betrayal, when in reality, he had set her adrift in a world that did not forgive weakness. And now, seeing her standing there, unwavering, yet scarred by the life he had indirectly forced upon her, he felt the gravity of every misstep, every decision, every absence he had allowed to shape her path. They moved again, faster now, urgency threading through every step. The alley twisted and turned, like a maze, each corner a potential ambush, each shadow a threat. Adrian's senses sharpened, taking in every sound, the distant wail of sirens, the whisper of rain against metal, the occasional echo of footsteps that were not theirs. He pressed Lena closer, body shielding her, instincts screaming at him to anticipate, react, and survive. Finally, they reached his penthouse, a fortress in the sky designed to be untouchable, impenetrable, a sanctuary above the chaos of the streets below. But as they approached the door, Adrian's eyes narrowed. Locks, expertly manipulated, told a story without words. Someone had been here. Someone had been waiting. Someone had invaded the one place he had considered absolute, untouchable. Inside, the penthouse was eerily quiet. The usual hum of air systems, the muted city sounds below, even the subtle buzz of the neon lights outside. None of it masked the tension coiled in the room. Adrian's hand moved instinctively, checking every corner, every shadow, every line of sight. Lena's grip on the baby tightened instinctively, ready for a fight she had learned long ago was often unavoidable. Adrian's eyes swept the room, scanning for signs of intrusion. No footsteps, no immediate threat, yet the air was thick with anticipation, electric and dangerous. The baby stirred again, small fingers curling instinctively around Lena's hand. She murmured softly, almost as a lullaby, a quiet anchor amid the storm. Adrian's heart thumped violently, each beat echoing in his chest like a war drum, a reminder that danger was never fully gone. Then he saw it, a note, placed deliberately on the central table, neat, precise, and impossibly calculated. Adrian's brow furrowed, eyes narrowing as he stepped closer. The handwriting was elegant, cruel in its simplicity. The words were few, yet carried the weight of a threat, a revelation, and a warning all at once. "You were never meant to know the truth." The phrase struck him like a bullet, a cold, visceral impact. Every instinct screamed that this was no casual message. It was personal, directed, calculated. Someone had anticipated his every move, orchestrated every encounter, every threat, every attack to lead him here. And now, at the apex of what he had survived, the final piece of the puzzle, or perhaps the first piece of a far more dangerous game, was laid bare before him. Lena's eyes met his, wide and questioning, Her body was rigid, protective, every muscle tuned to potential violence. Adrian studied her, trying to convey in a glance that they were not yet beaten, not yet cornered, that survival required action, strategy, and precision. But even as he formulated his next moves, he felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. Whoever left this note knew more than they could imagine. Whoever orchestrated this entire web had control over information, time, and fear in a way Adrian had rarely seen. He stepped closer to the note, reading and rereading, as the city lights flickered through the windows. Neon reflections danced across the polished floors like fractured memories, casting shadows that seemed to whisper secrets. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified, every movement pregnant with danger. Adrian's mind raced, tracing every possible scenario. Who could know? Who could orchestrate every attack, every manipulation, every falsification to bring him to this exact moment? The answer was elusive, cloaked in power and ruthlessness. He knew one thing: the truth was dangerous, deadly, and hidden in plain sight. Lena shifted slightly, moving instinctively to shield the child. Her voice, low and calm, broke the heavy silence. "They don't just want him," she whispered. "They want us to fail. They want us to fracture. They want you to break." Adrian's jaw tightened. He pressed a finger to the note, scanning its words again. The simplicity of the sentence belied its magnitude. He understood instinctively that every confrontation, every battle, every act of survival they had endured had been leading here, not just to the note, but to the truth it promised to conceal. Every instinct in him screamed urgency. Every cell demanded action. The child's soft coos, Lena's steadying presence, the distant hum of the city below, it all underscored the fragile, precarious position they occupied. Adrian knew that the next step, the first choice, could determine survival or annihilation. He turned toward Lena, expression hard, voice low but unyielding. "We've survived worse. We'll survive this. But we move carefully. Every step, every decision must be calculated. No mistakes." Her gaze met his, unwavering, steel-tempered with the weight of experience. She nodded subtly, the baby safe in her arms, a small anchor in the storm of their lives. They were partners in survival, equal in resolve, bound by shared danger and unspoken truths. Adrian's mind flickered back to the note. Whoever had left it knew their history, knew their fears, knew exactly how to strike at the core of their trust, their past, their family, and he knew this was far from over. The penthouse, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage set for the next act of a meticulously crafted trap. The rain outside pattered on the glass, neon reflections flickering like ghosts, casting fractured shadows that whispered secrets. Every shadow could conceal a threat, every reflection a lie waiting to be revealed. Then, as Adrian placed the note down, a faint click echoed from the hallway beyond the living space. He froze, body taut, senses blazing. Lena's head turned slightly, every muscle coiled, ready. Adrian's heart rate spiked. Someone had entered, quiet, calculated, an intent unmistakable. Every plan, every thought, every careful movement coalesced into a single, violent clarity. Whoever it was, they were not here for negotiation. They were here for answers. They were here to force the next stage of the game. A shadow emerged from the hallway, and Adrian recognized the silhouette instantly. It was someone he had believed dead, someone whose return could unravel everything he thought he knew about betrayal, power, and the very bloodline he was sworn to protect. The penthouse felt impossibly quiet once they settled inside. The storm outside reduced to a muffled patter against the glass walls. Lena sat on the couch, the baby asleep against her shoulder, soft breaths creating a rhythm that seemed almost hypnotic. Her posture was composed, measured, yet there was a subtle tension in the line of her shoulders, a tension born from years of survival and vigilance. For the first time since Adrian arrived, she allowed herself to soften. Not drop her guard entirely. That was impossible, but a small easing, a subtle relinquishment, hinted that trust was slowly returning. Adrian observed her from across the room, every muscle taut, every instinct screaming caution. He had seen her strength before, had felt it in moments of crisis, but this was different. This was the quiet power of someone who had endured, who had transformed pain and betrayal into armor and authority. The city lights filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting streaks of gold and crimson across her face. Every shadow, every flicker of neon, highlighted a version of Lena he had never known, and it cut him deeper than any confrontation could. She looked at him then, eyes steady, unreadable, and yet in them lay a hint of the vulnerability he had once cherished. "You need to understand," she began, voice low, calm, almost deadly in its restraint. "After you left, after you abandoned me without explanation, I was left with nothing but threats, stalking, and the same people who had framed me before." Her words were deliberate, measured, each one landing like a bullet in the still air of the room. Adrian's chest tightened. He remembered the nights he had spent walking away, thinking he was protecting her, thinking that absence could shield her from danger. And yet, here she was, standing, not just surviving, but thriving, unbroken and unyielding. The weight of his guilt pressed down, heavier than the rain-soaked streets or the gunfire that had followed them for days. Lena's gaze flicked to the baby briefly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear before returning her focus to Adrian. "They underestimated me," she continued. "They thought a scared girl abandoned by the man she trusted would break. But I didn't. I built something from nothing. A discreet investment network, powerful allies, influence no one suspected. A reputation no longer tied to you or to your legacy." The truth hit Adrian with the force of a storm. He had always thought he was the protector, the one who shaped outcomes, the one who ensured survival. And yet, in his absence, Lena had become the architect of her own destiny, a force he had neither foreseen nor anticipated. Her empire was silent, invisible to the world, but formidable. Every alliance, every maneuver, every calculated move spoke of intelligence, courage, and a will unyielding to manipulation. "I became somewhat impossible to erase," Lena said quietly, almost whispering, yet every word resonated with authority. "Impossible to control, impossible to ignore." Adrian's heart ached, a raw, gnawing ache. He had left to protect what he believed was hers to inherit, unaware that she would protect herself and thrive in ways he had never imagined. He had imagined her fragile, dependent, clinging to the safety he could provide. But that image shattered now, replaced by the undeniable truth. Lena had become her own weapon, her own fortress, and her own legacy. He moved closer, tentative, careful, aware of the fragile balance between closeness and intrusion. I left to protect you," he admitted, voice rough, tinged with guilt. "I thought if I removed myself, I could shield you from the chaos, from the syndicate, from me." Lena's expression softened, not entirely, but just enough to let him see the depth of her emotions. Pain, yes. Resentment, undoubtedly, but also recognition, understanding, and a quiet respect for the man who had once loved her so fiercely. "You underestimated me, Adrian," she said, tone even, but every syllable carried weight. "I didn't need protection. I needed survival, and I created it myself." Adrian swallowed hard, the gravity of her words sinking deep. Every encounter, every betrayal, every act of self-preservation had led her here. Unbreakable, untouchable, yet tethered to the past they shared. He had loved her once, left her once, and now faced a version of her that surpassed every memory he had carried. She shifted slightly, adjusting the baby, the soft coos breaking the silence. The room seemed impossibly still, yet heavy with tension. The storm outside had not passed, only diminished, reflecting the calm before an inevitable reckoning. Adrian's mind raced with questions, regrets, and strategies. He understood in that instant that survival and reunion would demand everything: trust, courage, and sacrifices he was prepared to make, but unsure if Lena was willing to accept. Their silence stretched, pregnant with history and unspoken truths. Adrian studied her, memorizing the lines of her face, the subtle strength in her hands, the quiet resilience in her posture. Lena's eyes met his, steady, commanding, yet shaded with caution. They both understood that this moment was fleeting, fragile, vulnerable, a prelude to storms yet to come. Adrian moved closer, lowering his voice, deliberate. "You've become everything I should have realized you were capable of. And I was blind." The weight of his confession hung between them like a blade. Lena's response was measured, deliberate. A pause, a small tilt of her head, an acknowledgement of truth without surrender. The baby stirred again, tiny fingers curling around Lena's sleeve. Adrian's gaze softened for a heartbeat, realizing the depth of responsibility that stretched beyond emotion, beyond pride. This child, a symbol of love, legacy, and future, was the axis upon which their survival now pivoted. Every decision mattered. Every misstep could be fatal. Then, abruptly, the lights in the penthouse cut out. The sudden darkness swallowed the room in an instant. Neon reflections flickered once, twice, then vanished, leaving shadows thick and oppressive. The baby stirred, sensing the tension, while Lena instinctively pulled him closer, her body coiled like a spring ready to strike. Adrian's instincts flared, every muscle tensed, every sense alert. The silence of the blackout was heavier than any noise. Every echo of movement, every creak of the building seemed amplified. He could hear Lena's soft breathing, the baby's gentle cooing, and the faint hum of electrical systems shutting down. Somewhere in the dark, movement stirred, calculated, deliberate, threatening. Adrian's eyes adjusted to the minimal glow from the city lights outside, scanning shadows, corners, and reflections. He knew immediately. This was no accident. Someone had infiltrated, someone waiting for the perfect moment to strike, someone who understood fear, strategy, and control. Lena's hand brushed his arm, a silent warning. Adrian's pulse thundered in his ears. Every memory of past ambushes, every encounter with the syndicate, every betrayal now converged into a single, urgent focus: protect, survive, and anticipate the unseen threat. In the suffocating darkness, he could sense the subtle movements, the shift of weight on the floor, the quiet steps that did not belong to either of them. The room felt impossibly small, yet infinitely dangerous. Every shadow could conceal a weapon, every corner a predator waiting. Adrian whispered, voice low but commanding, "Stay calm. No sudden movements. Whoever is here will reveal themselves soon." Lena nodded, her body instinctively pressing the baby closer. Her eyes, visible even in faint darkness, were sharp, unyielding, ready to act. She had survived abandonment, betrayal, and assassination attempts. She would survive this too. But even she could feel the weight of impending revelation pressing down, suffocating in its intensity. Then, a faint metallic click echoed through the room. Adrian froze, every nerve alert. The sound was deliberate, mechanical, precise. Someone had entered, and they were unafraid of being heard. He stepped forward, senses blazing, aware that this confrontation could determine survival or death. Lena mirrored him, coiled and ready, baby safe in her arms, a silent anchor in a storm of uncertainty. The shadows shifted. A figure emerged slowly, deliberately, from the corner of the penthouse. Adrian's eyes locked onto the silhouette, heart hammering, mind racing. The shape was unmistakable. It was someone he had believed gone forever, someone whose return could unravel every truth, every trust, every strategy he had relied on. The air thickened with tension, the city lights reflecting jaggedly off glass and metal. Every second stretched taut with anticipation. The figure stepped forward, voice low, icy, and familiar. Did you really think you could protect them without facing the consequences of the past, Adrian? The penthouse felt colder than it had moments ago. The faint hum of a backup generator vibrated through the floorboards, mingling with the soft patter of rain against the windows. Emergency lights flickered sporadically, casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. Every surface, every corner seemed alive, waiting, listening. Adrian's instincts screamed that the night was far from over. He moved with precision, reaching into a drawer and pulling out a weapon, its cold metal a familiar reassurance against the mounting tension. Lena held the baby close, her body taut, muscles coiled like a spring ready to strike. Every shadow was a potential threat. Every flicker of light a possible revelation of danger. Her eyes darted across the room, scanning the darkness, measuring angles, calculating risk. The baby's soft breathing seemed impossibly fragile against the oppressive silence, a reminder of what they had to protect. Then, a voice cut through the quiet, low, distorted, familiar, and dripping with malice. "You should have stayed away, Adrian." The words vibrated against the walls, cold and unyielding, carrying a history of betrayal and threat. Adrian's head snapped toward the sound, weapon raised, senses firing. The shadows shifted, a slow movement from the far corner of the room. A silhouette emerged from the darkness, deliberate, confident, and chillingly calm. Adrian's breath hitched, heart pounding like war drums in his chest. It was Jonah Reeves, Adrian's most trusted lieutenant, the man who had stood beside him through countless battles, the one whose loyalty he had never questioned. Jonah smirked, a cruel, knowing expression that sent ice crawling through Adrian's veins. His presence here, at this hour, in this place, was a declaration. Nothing was as it seemed. "Did you really think she betrayed you on her own?" Jonah asked, voice smooth, venom lacing every syllable. The question hung in the air like smoke, tainting every thought with suspicion and dread. Lena froze, baby tightening in her arms, sensing the sudden, sharp shift in danger. Adrian's blood ran cold. "Why?" Adrian demanded, voice low, controlled, but tinged with the raw edge of disbelief and rage. Every muscle in his body tensed. He had faced enemies before, but betrayal from within, from someone he had trusted, was a far deeper wound. Jonah shrugged casually, as though discussing trivialities rather than the fate of lives. "Because the syndicate didn't want you in love." he said smoothly, each word precise. "And I didn't want you distracted." The truth landed like a blade, slicing through the remnants of trust and certainty Adrian had clung to. Adrian's mind raced. Every encounter, every threat, every attack suddenly aligned in terrifying clarity. Jonah had orchestrated much of the chaos, manipulating events, framing Lena, ensuring Adrian's focus remained fractured. The realization stung worse than any physical blow. Every move Adrian had made had been anticipated, controlled, undermined from within. Lena's eyes widened, a mix of shock, rage, and disbelief flashing across her face. She held the baby tighter, protective instincts blazing. She had endured betrayal, threats, and attempts on her life before. But this was an inside job. This was personal. The very person Adrian had trusted implicitly had orchestrated it all. Jonah's smirk widened, and he shifted slightly, revealing the metallic glint of a weapon. Adrian's gaze snapped to it, mind immediately calculating angles, reactions, and contingencies. Every instinct screamed to act, to neutralize the threat before it escalated. But one small detail made him hesitate. The weapon was not aimed at him. It was aimed at the baby. The soft glow of emergency lights reflected off Jonah's face, highlighting a sadistic satisfaction in his expression. Every second stretched infinitely, each heartbeat a drum of tension that threatened to explode. Adrian's world narrowed to a single point: the child in Lena's arms, innocent, unthreatened, yet in imminent danger. Lena's body stiffened, coiled and ready. Her mind raced, calculating ways to shield the baby, to disarm, to survive. She had built empires, allies, and influence. But this, the immediate raw threat, was primal. It required instinct, courage, and sheer precision. Adrian moved subtly, a step closer, maintaining eye contact with Jonah. Every fiber of his being was alert, anticipating movement, reaction, and counteraction. He could sense the tension in Jonah's body, the controlled energy, the arrogance. Every detail mattered. Finger placement, breathing rhythm, slight shifts in weight. A single miscalculation could be fatal. "Jonah," Adrian began, voice low, dangerous, a warning hidden in calm. "You don't want to do this." His tone carried authority, experience, and the weight of consequences. But Jonah only tilted his head, a mocking, calculated gesture that made Adrian's blood run even colder. "You think I care," Jonah replied smoothly, voice dripping with disdain. "You've always been too soft, Adrian, too distracted. Love makes men weak. I just want to correct that." He shifted slightly, weapon still leveled, eyes gleaming with the thrill of control. Adrian's mind raced. Every strategy he had learned in the underworld, the art of misdirection, timing, intimidation, and rapid reaction, flashed through his consciousness. He had faced killers before, but this was a calculated, intimate betrayal. Jonah knew him too well, anticipated him too accurately. Every move Adrian made had to be precise, yet unpredictable. Lena's hand brushed against Adrian's, a silent anchor, her eyes conveying urgency, strategy, and trust. She would act with him, beside him, as she had always done. The baby stirred, sensing the mounting tension, tiny fingers clenching the fabric of Lena's clothing. Jonah shifted again, cocking the weapon with deliberate slowness. His smirk deepened, a predator savoring the moment before the kill. Every detail of his posture screamed confidence, arrogance, and deadly intent. He had planned this confrontation meticulously, anticipated hesitation, counted every heartbeat. Adrian's muscles coiled, instincts ready to strike. He moved subtly, shifting his weight, eyes locked on Jonah's movements, predicting, preparing. The room felt impossibly small, heavy with tension, every sound amplified. The hum of the generator, rain against windows, the baby's soft breathing, the faint metallic click of Jonah's weapon. Time stretched. Every second seemed an eternity. The weight of past betrayals, orchestrated attacks, and hidden manipulations converged into this singular moment. Adrian understood that the child's life, Lena's safety, and the fragile remnants of trust hung by a thread. Lena adjusted her hold on the baby, positioning herself slightly between Adrian and Jonah. Her presence was both shield and signal, ready to act, ready to protect, ready to counterstrike. Every movement was precise, measured, honed by years of survival, intelligence, and instinct. Jonah's smirk faltered for the briefest moment, a crack in his otherwise impenetrable facade. He realized, perhaps too late, that Adrian and Lena were no longer the people he had manipulated in the past. Experience, love, betrayal, and survival had forged a duo capable of extraordinary precision and deadly response. Adrian's breathing slowed, muscles coiled like steel springs, ready to unleash calculated violence. Every sense was heightened. The slight shift in Jonah's stance, the glint of his weapon, the faintest sound of movement outside the penthouse. The room was alive with anticipation, danger, and inevitable confrontation. Lena's eyes met Adrian's for a fleeting moment, silent communication passing between them. Plan, act, survive. They were in sync, a unit forged through fire, betrayal, and shared survival. The baby remained in her arms, fragile yet central to the stakes of the encounter. Jonah's finger tightened on the trigger, ready to act, the glint of the weapon catching the emergency light, a small beacon of imminent threat. Every heartbeat stretched, each one echoing in Adrian's chest, counting down to a decision, a reaction, a strike that could determine life or death. Adrian's mind mapped every possible scenario: disarm, distraction, negotiation, ambush. Every option carried risk, but hesitation was impossible. The baby's life depended on perfect execution, flawless timing, and absolute focus. Then, Jonah's smirk widened again, confidence unwavering. "One wrong move, Knight," he said, "and the air disappears before you can blink." Adrian's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing. He could feel the tension, the coiled threat, the predator's anticipation. He was ready. Every ounce of skill, every calculated instinct, every shard of emotion focused into a singular, unrelenting purpose: protect, survive, and reclaim control. Lena shifted, subtly moving the baby to the side, her body a protective barrier, eyes locked on Jonah. The atmosphere was electric, thick with anticipation, every movement pregnant with deadly consequence. Jonah's hand twitched slightly on the weapon, signaling intent, readiness. Every second stretched impossibly long, every heartbeat a countdown. Before Adrian could react, a sharp, metallic crack echoed through the penthouse. Jonah's gun fired, but instead of striking the baby, a mirror above the fireplace shattered, sending shards raining down and creating a reflection that revealed someone else in the room, a hidden figure who had been watching, waiting, and ready to strike. The penthouse erupted into chaos. Rain hammered against the windows, cascading down like shards of ice, as the storm outside mirrored the violence inside. Adrian lunged with precision, born of years surviving in the underworld. Every muscle coiled, every step calculated, every heartbeat synced to the rhythm of survival. A shot rang out. The bullet tore through the air, grazing his side. Pain lanced through him, sharp, searing, yet insufficient to slow him. Blood seeped through his shirt, warm, and heavy, marking the moment, marking the price of every choice he had made. Lena screamed, her voice raw with panic and fury. She surged forward instinctively, arms outstretched as if to physically anchor Adrian against the chaos. Her eyes wide with terror and determination. The baby squirmed slightly in her grip, sensing the tension, the threat, the storm of human violence surrounding them. Jonah Reeves stood calmly, a predator basking in his perceived control. His hands moved with deliberate, unnerving calm, fingers manipulating the magazine, cocking the weapon with mechanical precision. There was no haste, only boredom, the boredom of a man confident in his upper hand. "You were supposed to remain the Empire's weapon," Jonah said, voice smooth, cold, a serpent coiled in words. "Not a father, not a husband, just a ghost with a crown." Every syllable dripped with calculated malice, a reminder of the world Adrian had tried to navigate. Loyalty, power, and the cruel orchestration of life and death. Adrian's jaw tightened, teeth clenched against pain and fury. Every instinct screamed forward, every cell demanding action. If being human, if feeling love and guilt, if protecting family was weakness, then he embraced it. "If being human is a weakness," he spat through gritted teeth, "then I welcome it." The words carried weight, conviction, defiance, a shield forged in fire. The room erupted into violence. Furniture was overturned, glass shattered, and the echoes of gunfire mingled with shouts in the pounding of rain. Adrian moved like a predator and a protector simultaneously, dodging, weaving, striking with precision, honed by years of blood and betrayal. Every blow he delivered was calculated, every movement a balance between survival and offense. Lena dove behind overturned furniture, holding the baby close, a human shield of love and instinct. Her breath came in shallow, rapid bursts, eyes darting for threats. She had built empires in her absence, yet nothing had trained her for the visceral, intimate terror of seeing those she loved under immediate threat. Yet she did not falter, not for a heartbeat, not for a second. Jonah's attacks were ruthless, precise, each one meant to wound, subdue, and dominate. Adrian's body ached, blood flowing, muscles straining under the effort, yet his resolve remained unbroken. Pain was temporary, survival, duty, and vengeance demanded everything. He moved, struck, countered, his mind a machine of strategy and instinct, his heart a furnace of rage and love intertwined. The fight escalated, brutal and desperate. Every sound was amplified. The snap of furniture, the ricochet of bullets, the cries and gasps that punctuated the chaos. Adrian's focus narrowed. Tunnel vision on Jonah, on protecting Lena and the child, on surviving long enough to ensure the empire, the family, and their lives remained intact. Jonah smirked despite the brutality, reveling in the violence, confident that his manipulation and betrayal had orchestrated this crescendo. He underestimated, however, the singular force that love, regret, and protective instinct could unleash. Adrian's strikes became sharper, faster, more precise, each blow narrowing the gap between life and death, between control and surrender. Finally, in a culmination of strength, skill, and determination, Adrian overpowered Jonah. The final blow pinned him to the ground, air expelled from lungs with a hiss of pain and shock. Jonah's weapon skidded across the floor, metallic and meaningless now. Adrian stood over him, chest heaving, pain and adrenaline coalescing into a potent clarity. He had survived. Sirens began to echo from the streets below, a distant but growing promise of backup. Lena's contacts arrived with impeccable timing, storming the building, their presence adding pressure to the chaotic symphony already in motion. The balance of power shifted as officers and allies moved through the penthouse with calculated efficiency, securing exits and ensuring no additional threats remained. Jonah Reeves struggled under Adrian's grip, his confidence shaken but not entirely gone. Even as he was dragged away, he smirked, lips curling with menace and knowledge. "You still don't know who ordered this," he whispered, voice low, venomous, yet eerily calm. His eyes glinted with secrets, promises of further danger, and the weight of truths yet to be revealed. Adrian's chest heaved, blood seeping into his clothing, pain slicing through him like a sharpened blade. But his focus remained on Lena and the child. He moved to shield them, to reassure them, to reclaim control. Every action, every word, every glance communicated survival, protection, and unyielding resolve. Lena's hands trembled slightly, gripping the baby, her heart hammering in sync with Adrian's. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside, a reflection of turmoil, danger, and the forces conspiring against them. Yet she remained steadfast, a pillar of strength, honed by betrayal and survival, unbroken, untouchable, and resolute. Jonah's retreating form was a reminder that victory was temporary, fleeting, and never guaranteed. Adrian's body ached, wounds burning, every breath a challenge. Yet the knowledge that they had survived this encounter, that they had preserved life and reclaimed some measure of control, was tempered by the truth Jonah had left behind. The weight of uncertainty pressed down like a physical force. Whoever had orchestrated the attack, manipulated the syndicate, and endangered his family was still at large, still operating in shadows. The knowledge that betrayal had deeper roots, that danger was still imminent, created a tension that Adrian could neither ignore nor easily resolve. Adrian's gaze fell to the floor, eyes scanning for any lingering threats. He felt the pulse of the city below, the rhythm of rain, the distant sirens, and the quiet breath of the baby in Lena's arms. Every element seemed amplified, every sound a reminder that their world was fragile, precarious, and under siege from forces unseen. He crouched beside Lena, one hand steadying the baby, the other pressing against his side, tasting blood, feeling pain, yet unbroken. "We survived," he whispered, voice low, full of grit and determination. "But the fight isn't over." Lena nodded, eyes hard and resolute, her presence a grounding force, a partner in the battle that still loomed large. Jonah's words echoed in his mind, a sinister refrain he could not ignore. "You still don't know who ordered this." Every syllable was a promise of chaos, a warning that their enemies were deeper, more powerful, and more personal than Adrian had anticipated. He pressed his hand to the baby, feeling the tiny, delicate heartbeat, and realized the stakes had escalated beyond power, beyond revenge. This was about legacy, protection, and reclaiming control from shadows that had haunted him for years. Lena's gaze met his, steady, unwavering, conveying trust, strategy, and readiness. They were aligned, a force forged through fire, betrayal, and survival. Together, they could face the threats lurking in the dark, but the path forward remained uncertain, treacherous, and full of peril. Adrian rose, adjusting his stance, surveying the room. Sirens grew louder, approaching. Allies secured exits, barricaded windows, and scanned the penthouse for lingering threats. Every detail mattered. Every movement was critical. Jonah's final words repeated in Adrian's mind. "It wasn't me. It was someone she knows." The implication was devastating, far-reaching, and personal. The enemy was no longer faceless, no longer distant. It was someone intimately tied to Lena, someone who understood her past, her strength, and her vulnerabilities. Adrian's blood ran cold, his heart pounded, every nerve alive with tension, every muscle coiled in preparation. The realization that the next betrayal could come from the people closest to her, closest to him, created a suffocating weight. He glanced at Lena, her eyes reflecting a mix of fear, determination, and unspoken questions. The baby stirred, tiny fingers clutching the fabric of Lena's blouse. The stakes had risen beyond survival. The battle had become personal, intimate, and unavoidable. Adrian's mind raced, piecing together every past threat, every manipulation, every attack. The puzzle was incomplete, but the pieces he did have pointed to an enemy close to home, someone with knowledge, access, and deadly intent. The storm outside intensified, rain pelting the windows, neon reflections slicing through the darkness, casting jagged shadows across walls and floor. The penthouse felt smaller, more claustrophobic, every corner a potential threat, every shadow hiding secrets. Lena shifted slightly, instinctively shielding the baby, eyes scanning the room. Adrian noted her precision, her calm under pressure, and felt a renewed surge of respect and awe. She had become the embodiment of resilience, strength, and strategy. Yet even as they steadied, the lingering truth remained. The enemy was someone she knew, someone she trusted, someone whose betrayal cut deeper than any gunshot or attack could. Adrian's jaw tightened. Every plan, every thought, every resource he had was now focused on uncovering this traitor, neutralizing the threat, and ensuring the safety of the child and the woman who had become his anchor in a world of chaos. He took a deep breath, eyes narrowing, mind already racing with strategies, contingencies, and possibilities. This was no longer about revenge. It was about uncovering truth, protecting family, and confronting betrayal in its most intimate form. As Adrian leaned closer to Lena, tracing the contours of danger and calculating their next move, a soft, deliberate knock echoed through the penthouse. A voice whispered from the shadows, chilling and unmistakable. "Do you really think you've survived everything? The real game begins tonight." The sterile scent of antiseptic and polished floors filled Adrian's senses as he slowly opened his eyes. The fluorescent lights above were harsh, white, almost cruel in their precision, but they illuminated the truth he had sought for months. The hospital room was quiet, almost too quiet, as though holding its breath in anticipation of what would unfold. Lena sat beside him, the baby asleep against her chest. The soft rhythm of the child's breathing created a fragile serenity in the room. But Adrian could sense the tension in the air, the aftermath of chaos, and the ever-present threat of unseen enemies. She looked at him differently now, not with pity, but with a warmth that hinted at understanding, endurance, and hope tempered by scars he had never known. Her eyes met his, soft, wounded, and resolute. "Adrian," she began quietly, voice low yet steady. "You've been through hell, and so have I." Her gaze held his, unwavering, as though measuring not only the man he had been, but the man he could become. Adrian's chest tightened. Months of regret, fear, and guilt pressed down, heavy and suffocating. Every memory of the past, the abandonment, the betrayal, the chaos, flashed before his eyes. Yet here she was, the woman who had survived it all, stronger, sharper, and impossibly resilient. She spoke again, words deliberate, weighty, impossible to ignore. "Jonah wasn't the mastermind. He was a tool, a pawn used to manipulate you, to divide us." Adrian's jaw clenched at the truth, the realization cutting deeper than any bullet ever could. Every scheme, Every attack, every manipulated moment had been orchestrated by someone far more insidious, someone hidden deep within the syndicate's shadows. Lena leaned closer, the baby shifting slightly in her arms, tiny hands brushing against her collarbone. "The real orchestrator," she continued, voice low and dangerous, "is someone who has feared us, our union, our strength, someone who knew that together we could topple them, reshape the balance of power." Adrian's mind raced. Months of conflict, survival, and revelation suddenly converged, and the pieces fell into a terrifying pattern. The enemy had been patient, meticulous, and intimate with the intricacies of their lives. Every betrayal had been personal, calculated, and intended to weaken not just him, but the bond they shared. Lena's hand brushed the baby's soft hair as she looked at Adrian. "I'm not running anymore," she said, voice firm, unwavering, a declaration as much to herself as to him. "But I won't let you destroy yourself for me either. Whatever comes next, we face it together or not at all." Adrian swallowed hard, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Every scar, every wound, every regret seemed to converge in this moment, and he realized that love, survival, and vengeance were all threads woven into a single tapestry of choice and consequence. "Just give me a chance," he whispered, voice rough with pain and longing, "to earn you back." For a long moment, Lena did not respond. She simply placed the baby gently in his arms, the first time he had ever held him. The child, tiny and perfect, looked up at Adrian with wide, innocent eyes, curling tiny fingers around his. The warmth and fragility of life rested in his hands, a silent promise of hope, a fragile anchor against the storm that still raged outside. Adrian's heart ached, a mix of love, regret, and awe. He looked down at the child, tracing the delicate fingers, memorizing the weight, the warmth, the living proof of everything he had fought to protect and everything he had failed to protect. Lena watched with a trembling breath, the soft rise and fall of her chest betraying the storm of emotion beneath her composed exterior. "Adrian," she whispered, voice soft, trembling, yet threaded with steel, "when you're strong again, we need to talk about who ordered all of this." Her eyes darkened, dangerous, the calm veneer broken by the gravity of what was to come. "And why they're not done yet." Adrian's mind sharpened. Every detail from the past months, every betrayal, every death threat, every shadowed moment of fear, all of it coalesced into the understanding that their battle was far from over. The syndicate's machinations were deeper than he had imagined, and the true enemy had remained in the shadows, patient, waiting for the right moment to strike. The room remained quiet for a heartbeat. The only sounds the baby's gentle breathing and the faint hum of hospital machinery. Yet the tension was palpable, the weight of unseen threats pressing down like a tangible force. Every instinct Adrian had honed over years of mafia life screamed that danger was never far, that the orchestrator still lurked somewhere, ready to strike again. Suddenly, the quiet was broken by the soft click of the door opening. A nurse entered, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone used to routine. Yet even her presence carried an air of unease. In her hands was a sealed envelope, unmarked, its existence seeming both mundane and sinister. "No name listed," the nurse said quietly, handing it to Adrian and Lena. "Someone left it at the front desk for you both." Her eyes lingered a moment longer, unspoken questions and concerns reflected in her gaze, before she retreated into the hallway. Adrian's fingers closed around the envelope, the paper crisp and heavy, with promise and threat. He felt a pulse of adrenaline spike through his veins, every instinct alert. His eyes met Lena's, and in that silent exchange, volumes were communicated: trust, fear, caution, and readiness. Written across the front, in bold, deliberate letters, was a message that froze them both. "We know about the child." The words sent a cold shiver down Adrian's spine. Every calculation, every plan, every contingency now had to include the baby, the child, who was both their greatest joy and their greatest vulnerability. Whoever had left this note knew, watched, and understood the stakes perfectly. Lena's eyes narrowed, gaze sharp, mind already racing with strategies, contingencies, and hidden defenses. Her empire, her allies, her experience, all of it now converged on protecting the child and uncovering the final adversary. She moved subtly closer to Adrian, a silent declaration of unity, of partnership, of shared strength against the invisible threat looming over them. Adrian's jaw clenched, blood still pumping from old wounds, adrenaline masking pain. He understood immediately. This was not just a warning. It was a declaration. The enemy had knowledge, access, and power enough to strike when they least expected it. The baby stirred slightly in his arms, tiny fingers curling, innocent and unaware of the darkness pressing in. Adrian tightened his hold, a protective shield, a silent vow that nothing would harm this child while he drew breath. Outside the hospital, the storm continued to rage, wind lashing against windows, rain hammering metal roofs. The world felt as chaotic and dangerous as the underworld Adrian had once navigated. Yet here, in this fragile hospital room, the stakes were more personal, more intimate, and infinitely more perilous. Adrian's mind raced through every potential ally, every enemy, every contact in the syndicate, every move that could reveal the identity of the hidden mastermind. Months of deception, manipulation, and betrayal had prepared him for this final reckoning, but the envelope's message reminded him that vigilance was eternal. Lena's hands brushed his arm, grounding him. Her gaze held his in a silent promise. They would face whatever came next together, but the enemy was close, intimate, and cunning. There could be no mistakes. Every plan had to be flawless, every move precise. Adrian inhaled deeply, savoring a brief, fleeting calm before the inevitable storm. He looked down at the baby, feeling the fragile pulse of life against his chest, a tangible reminder of why survival mattered, why revenge mattered, why love mattered. The envelope lay heavy between them, a harbinger of danger, a symbol of stakes they could neither ignore nor postpone. Whoever had left it was watching, waiting, and capable of unimaginable ruthlessness. The air in the room seemed to thicken, shadows stretching longer, flickering under the hospital's weak fluorescent lights. Every instinct, every memory, every lesson from his past life screamed that the night was far from over, that the true game had only just begun. Adrian met Lena's gaze once more, eyes burning with resolve, determination, and the unspoken acknowledgement of the peril surrounding them. They were no longer merely survivors. They were guardians, warriors, and strategists, standing at the threshold of a final confrontation with a hidden, ruthless enemy. Then slowly, Adrian reached for the envelope, breaking the silence that had settled like a weight over the room. He felt the tension spike, the possibility of immediate danger looming. Every movement mattered. Every reaction could determine life or death. Lena's hand rested on his, a silent anchor, signaling readiness, trust, and unity. She did not speak, but her presence alone communicated a depth of understanding, courage, and unbreakable resolve. Adrian lifted the envelope, fingers trembling slightly. Anticipation and fear mixing in a visceral cocktail. The words they had read before, "We know about the child," hung like a dark promise in the air, an unyielding reminder that the enemy was close, intimate, and watching every move. As his eyes traced the seal and the ominous handwriting, the room seemed to contract, shadows deepening, heartbeat accelerating. They were poised on the precipice of revelation, of danger, of choices that would define their future. A sudden movement in the hallway outside made them both freeze. The baby stirred again, tiny fingers clutching at Adrian's shirt. Every sense sharpened. Every instinct screamed that the next moment would change everything. The envelope's seal cracked, paper trembling in Adrian's hands, and a voice, low, calm, and unmistakable, whispered through the door. "You thought hiding him would keep him safe. But now the syndicate knows the truth, and the game has only begun." The room fell silent. Rain hammered harder. Neon lights reflected jagged shadows across walls. The baby slept, oblivious to the storm outside. But the war for his life had already begun. Fade to black,